Benjamin Franklin. At the time when the King of England ruled over the American colonies, there stood a small house on Milk Street in Boston. Here there lived a candle maker named Josiah Franklin, his wife, and 17 children. He had 10 sons. The youngest, Benjamin, was born in 1706 and soon grew very bright. He learned to read when he was knee-high to a grasshopper and asked questions from morning till night. Once he bought a whistle with all the pennies he got for the holidays. He marched through the house shrilly blowing it while his family stopped up their ears. They teased him and called him a spendthrift for paying 4 times what the whistle was worth. That was the only time Benjamin spent a penny unwisely. He had so many ideas. One day, while he was swimming, he fastened a kite to himself as if it were a sail and he were a boat. It carried him gently through the water. Ideas like this made him a leader with his playmates. But sometimes he led them all into mischief. Once he found a pile of stones near where he liked to fish. The stones were for building a house, but he and his friends built a fine wharf to fish from. When the workmen came back, he was in trouble. Benjamin's father sent him to a grammar school when he was 8. He was good at reading and writing, but poor in arithmetic. So, when Benjamin was just 10 years old, his father took him out of school and had him work in the candle-making shop. Benjamin hated dipping candles and cutting wicks. When he could, he read and dreamed of ships and voyages, but his father didn't want him to run away to sea. Finally, when Benjamin was 12, he became an apprentice in the printing shop of his brother James. James was very hard on Ben. At first, all Benjamin did was the dirty work, such as sweeping floors and washing type. But in time, James taught him to set type and to print. At work, he saved money to buy books by eating simple meals in the shop rather than eating out with the others. Benjamin wanted very much to become a writer himself, especially for his brother's newspaper. One morning, his brother found under the door a letter to the newspaper signed Widow Do-Good. James did not recognize Benjamin's writing, for he had disguised it. James and his friends praised the widow's good sense and learning and printed the letter and others that followed. Ben chuckled and was very pleased with himself. But when he finally told James, his brother was stricter than ever. After 5 years of his 9-year apprenticeship, Ben made up his mind to run away. Late one night, he secretly boarded a ship bound for New York. He was only 17 and did not know a soul in that city. New York in 1723 was a very small town. There was only one printer who had no work for Ben. He suggested that Ben go on to the larger town of Philadelphia. Ben took a small boat over to the Jersey shore. Suddenly, a storm blew up. In the storm, a Dutch man fell overboard. Ben quickly grabbed him by the hair and pulled him back into the boat. The man handed Ben a book to dry out. It was the most beautiful book Benjamin had ever seen, printed in Europe with fine type and many pictures. He decided that was the kind of book he would like to print. He walked 100 miles from New York to Philadelphia through mud, rain, and storm. By the time he reached the city, he looked so bedraggled and forlorn, it was a wonder he was not sent home as a runaway. He was so hungry he stopped at a baker's shop and asked for 3 pennies worth of bread. Bread was cheap in Philadelphia, so the baker handed him 3 huge buns. The people turned their heads to hide their smiles when they saw Benjamin walking up Market Street with his pockets stuffed with clothes and his arms full of bread. A pretty girl standing in a doorway snickered and giggled out loud. But soon people were laughing at his jokes instead of his looks and praising him for being a good printer and a fine young fellow. One such person was the governor of Pennsylvania himself. He filled Benjamin's head with ideas of owning his own shop. Benjamin was to go all the way to London to get a printing press. The governor would send money and write letters to people who would help. Benjamin went to London, but he found neither money nor letters waiting for him. However, he quickly set about finding work in the best printing houses in London. When he returned to Philadelphia, his friends helped him set up his own shop. When they saw him pushing his papers through the streets on a wheelbarrow, they said, "He will go far. We see him at work when we get up. He's still working when we go to bed." He saved every penny and soon had a house of his own. He decided to marry Deborah Reed, who happened to be the girl who laughed at him when he first came to Philadelphia. Benjamin soon became famous for a calendar he wrote and printed called Poor Richard's Almanac. He filled it with puns and funny sayings. "Don't throw stones at your neighbors if your own windows are glass. Diligence is the mother of good luck. Early to bed and early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise." Poor Richard made the Franklins prosperous, but still they lived simply. One day Benjamin's wife served him breakfast in a china dish with a silver spoon. She said that if his neighbors could have china and silver, so could he, since he was a greater man than all of them. Benjamin Franklin was a good citizen and started many things the city needed: a fire department, a hospital, a public police watch, library, and a school that later became the University of Pennsylvania. Benjamin was an inventor of many practical things. A favorite was a little iron stove with an open front that fitted into the fireplace and sent warm air into all corners of the room. The Franklin stove became famous, even in Europe. Franklin also became known for his experiments with electricity. 6 years of practice made him very skilled at making electricity with friction discs and Leyden jars, like batteries, and other equipment. Young and old flocked around him to feel the shocks and to see the electric sparks. It was no game to Franklin, but he couldn't help laughing when visitors jumped into the air, their hair standing on end. Soon he came to believe that electricity and lightning were the same thing. In his famous experiment one summer, he flew a silk kite with a pointed rod on top in the middle of a thunderstorm. When he touched his knuckle to a key hanging from the string, he felt a shock. His son charged a Leyden jar with electricity. Using this idea, he invented the lightning rod, a metal spike to put on a roof to lead the lightning down a wire to the ground. The lightning rod made him famous around the world. The people of Pennsylvania thought Benjamin Franklin would be the perfect person to go to England and tell them that American taxes were too high and should be decided by Americans, not English. Franklin had to stay in England many years, arguing first for Pennsylvania and then all the colonies. He was growing old, and while he was away, his wife died. But he could not convince the English to be fair. Finally, he came home to join the fight for American independence. He helped Thomas Jefferson write the famous Declaration of Independence, stating that the American colonies were no longer part of England. As he signed it on July 4th, 1776, he said to the other signers, "We must indeed hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately." But Franklin's work was not done. Even as an old man of 70, he sailed off for France to get help for the American army. He took along a special bathtub with a cover so he could soak his tired bones even while he chatted with people. The French loved Benjamin Franklin. He was very famous in France. Everywhere there were pictures of him. He told all the lords and ladies about America, its freedoms, and the needs of George Washington and his brave but ragged soldiers. Finally, he went to see the King of France himself. He went dressed in his plain brown suit, but he persuaded the French to help in the war and to recognize America as a free and independent country. After 9 years, Benjamin Franklin returned to his beloved Philadelphia. The streets were thronged with happy people come to greet their greatest son. But best of all for Benjamin, there was his dear daughter and her children. Benjamin Franklin's work was not yet done, for he also helped to write the American Constitution and start the government we have today. Only then did he retire to the quiet of his library to read his beloved books in peace.